What we'll do is we'll have a representative from Lead Now Canada, who's Amy Lubik, and it's they believe we should come together to defend the things we care about, like we're doing this evening. I think that's really, we need to also build the momentum so we can rise to the very major challenges of our time. Something that Harper just doesn't want to do. He just does not want to deal with other parties or anything else other than his own thoughts. So, Amy, thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. So the current Fair Elections Act is about as much about fairness as the omnibus budget bill was about having a good budget. It's really to stack the odds in favor of the current government. I'm thrilled that the government has started to amend some of the acts that they've proposed. However, it does not go far enough. I feel it's kind of a bait and switch. They get rid of a couple of the offensive pieces of legislation and hope that it'll go through. But we can't let that happen. Personally, I'm very worried about the changes to vouching and doing away with the voter ID cards. Voter ID card is how I usually go and vote, and over 500,000 Canadians used that in the last election. If we want fair elections, they should represent more Canadian voices and not less. By my math, in the last election, in an election where 60% of Canadians who could voted, with a majority of 39%, we have a government in a majority now who represents about 25 or 23% on a good day of the Canadian population. And in some of those ridings, they won by about 18 votes or so. So this is not a government that should be making such sweeping changes to our electoral system. And a young Stephen Harper would agree with me. In 1996, when the Liberals were trying to change the election laws, Stephen Harper said, "In my view, this procedure of using time allocation for electoral law, doing it quickly and without the consent of other political parties, is the kind of dangerous application of electoral practices that we're more likely to find in a third world country." Every discussion we have during the debate, in committee hearings, in the House, has come to the conclusion that with further discussion, we'll be able to reach a consensus among all the parties. Currently, the opposition, over 468 top academics and over 84,000 Canadians who have signed our petitions, have come out against this act. So this act needs to be heavily amended, much more so than it is now, or scrapped altogether. Now, in February and March, Lead Now held events across the country called Connect. We had over 80 events, ranging in size from 12 to 300 people, and we asked Canadians what they wanted to see along the lines of electoral reform and fair democracy. And what they had to say is represented nowhere in this act. The Canadians we talked to wanted to move beyond the first past the post system and find, reducing, I wish it was as tall as the other speakers.
You don't have to be that close to the...
Okay. Anyway. So we want to make sure all the votes count, because right now, the majority of the ballots cast actually don't count towards our election. It makes it a very skewed election. The Canadians that we talked to wanted the different parties to work together and cooperate. And in Europe, 21 of 28 countries, who are much more progressive than Canada, use proportional representation, which takes into account votes of all the parties. And that makes it much more representative of the population as a whole. Furthermore, this act, the amount that an MP can say, even if it represents the wishes of their constituents, even in the leading caucus, is limited, which limits debate. It's up to the leader of the party to decide which candidates can run a riding, whether it's the preferred candidate of the constituency or not. And this power can be used to force MPs to backbench and to toe the party line for fearing of not being elected in the next or being allowed to run in the last election. An election candidate should have the power to regulate this. Some of the biggest dangers of this bill are to disengage and disenfranchise Canadians who are already voting at the lowest numbers that we've seen and don't believe that the government is listening to them. A great many young Canadians, 60% of whom did between the ages of 18 and 34 did not vote in the last election, believe that the only thing that the government listens to is big money. Canadians want to participate through participatory budgeting, referendums, online consultations, and town hall meetings, so that people can be involved in the decisions that affect them directly, such as overarching trade agreements that lock our country into a holding pattern for decades. And so many people that we talk to want greater power given to Elections Canada to promote voting. And this bill still prohibits Elections Canada from doing that. We need to educate our children on why it's important to vote, and also educate them on how hard we've fought to have the right to vote. And there is a great desire from the people that we talk to limit the part that big money can pay in elections. This bill only serves to increase the amount of money that can be spent. Some of this has been proposed to be amended. However, the amount of money that a candidate can put toward their own campaign is to be increased by over 300%, which will greatly stack the odds of who will win, and usually against the candidate who would more likely represent their constituency. To increase fairness, Elections Canada should be able to limit the amount of money that can be donated to something that all Canadians can afford. In Quebec, they've recently put in legislation that even individuals and corporations can only donate about $100 in an election. And that seems more representative. Federal elections watchdogs should have the right to any document they request to confirm compliance with Canadian elections audit laws, and the watchdogs of several provinces are allowed to do this. Currently, the amendment of the Act allows parties to audit themselves. This Fair Elections Act has nothing to do with making elections fairer. In fact, it goes against the best interests and the best ideas of the Canadian public. The amount of pressure Canadians have put on the government to force them to amend the bill is wonderful. However, there's still too much fodder that is dangerous to this country. So we need to raise our voices, sign the petitions, write our MPs, and try to talk to them if we can, and force them to kill the bill.